I was fascinated by computers, specifically how I could use them creatively. Starting in middle school, I began making things in Microsoft Paint, KidPix, and Print Shop Deluxe. By high school, I had moved on to tools like Photoshop, Flash, Bryce 3D, and Dreamweaver. This interest led me to study graphic design at the University of North Texas. The program at UNT was pretty traditional, and it focused heavily on concept and craftsmanship. After graduating college in 2007, my first job was at a tiny design studio called the Decoder Ring in Austin, Texas. And there I designed a lot of branding, screen-printed posters, and music packaging. Despite this being my dream job coming out of school, after working there for just 1 year, I jumped at an unexpected opportunity to join Facebook's design team in California. I ended up working at Facebook for over 5 years, designing all kinds of branding, marketing, events, signage, internal culture projects, and more. In 2014, I left Facebook, moved to Brooklyn, and started my own independent consulting practice. This is some of the work from those first few years, and much of it was still in and around the tech industry. In late 2015, I recall seeing this post about the founding of OpenAI, and I thought it sounded fascinating and ambitious. Less than a year later, a mutual friend introduced me to Ludwig Pedersen, OpenAI's first in-house designer. Ludwig was looking for someone to help him design the OpenAI brand. At launch, OpenAI had only this handsome word mark designed by prolific icon designer Louis Mantilla Jr. Ludwig wanted to take things in a completely new direction, and he hired me to help him. We began our collaboration with several long conversations about what the new brand should feel like. We wanted to avoid using any of the existing cliches of AI, brains and circuit boards, etc. We wanted it to feel optimistic and utopian. Basically, the brief was make it feel the opposite of the Terminator. Much more like this Robert McCall painting for Disney's Epcot. I began by focusing on the word mark. These were some of the initial options proposed, a mixture of existing typefaces and custom type. Also, at the time, AI was not nearly as prevalent as it is today, and there was an issue with people reading that original word mark as OpenAL. So the only requirement was that we have an unambiguous capital I. This is what we ended up preferring. It's a typeface named Colfax from Process Type Foundry. And eventually, we ended up working with Eric Olson at Process Type to create a custom variant with our capital I character and custom weights tuned for our use on the website. At first, I was actually a bit skeptical about creating a symbol mark, but Ludwig was insistent that we at least explore it. I knew immediately that anything I did would need to be abstract, so I focused on trying to figure out the high-level story I wanted to tell. I wanted it to be a story of aspiration, hope, and growth. I started, as I often do, by drawing shapes to represent the various concepts I wanted to put together. This is actually a slide directly from one of my presentations to Ludwig early on. And then I just drew lots and lots of sketches. Here are just a few that made it onto the computer. Ludwig was busy designing the website alongside my work on the branding, and it was a really good feedback loop, each informing the other. Eventually, I found a combination of the ideas that captured the story I wanted to tell. These were the very first rough sketches for the symbol, and I knew immediately, this is it. It's one of those life moments where I remember exactly where I was. I drew this in my sketchbook while sitting in Hart Coffee in Southeast Portland. This was the first version drawn on the computer, and this was the final version. And I'll go back and forth a few times so you can kind of see the differences. And this was the concept behind it. The hexagon in the center represents a precise human-made artificial object. The lines radiating out from the center represent optimism and a burst of intelligence. The blossoming exterior represents growth and the transformation into something beautiful. As a consultant, I mostly work asynchronously from my clients. And I make almost all of my presentations by talking over the slides, making a recording, talking over the slides. It's a little bit redundant to what I just presented, but here's an excerpt from my final presentation put together for Greg Brockman in early 2017.
AI, it's a pretty abstract concept to try to represent, visually in a symbol. And Ludwig and I, we talked and we agreed really early on that we wanted to avoid really obvious cliches of circuit boards and brains and nodes. And so my approach, really kind of settled on like trying to combine three basic elements into an abstract symbol that was itself kind of a story of AI. So first, I wanted something that represented machines, something precise, mathematic, geometric, inorganic, inert. And I eventually settled on the hexagon. Second, I wanted something that represented, this idea of sort of the magic that needs to happen for machines to achieve true intelligence or sentience. Something that represented, activity, spark, learning, inspiration, transition. This idea of emergence. And then finally, I wanted something that represented, the intelligence or the sentience itself. Something uplifting, something hopeful, something aspirational, organic, and ultimately beautiful. And so, at the end of the day, most of this conceptual story isn't that important. It just needs to be a nice and unique symbol that can function as this visual shortcut in people's brains to your organization. It really just needs to feel appropriate. And it's kind of like your own personal representation or reputations. This symbol will accrue meaning, positive or negative, based on the actions of OpenAI and the sort of things that it does and how people start to perceive your organization. Those feelings will be transferred onto this symbol.
Once we had the symbol in place, we began refining all the other aspects of the identity, writing documentation, and applying it across various applications. Writing guidelines and creating reusable assets is a critical part of the work. I always want to try and make it as easy as possible for people to use the systems I create. Here's a couple slides from the guidelines. This one shows acceptable lockups. And this one was about the importance of the correct orientation of the symbol. And here's some of the stuff we applied it to: branding on shirts, business cards, stickers, etc. And I hired my friend Erica Gorichow to create an animated version of the symbol. This was my sketch explaining to her how I thought it should animate. And here's her final animation. Over the years, I've been asked and I've seen criticism for my use of varying stroke weights in the logo. And for the record, I did this for two reasons. First, I wanted to create a sense of depth like an opening flower. But second, and more importantly, I think that mono-weight line work is primarily an artifact of computer software like Adobe Illustrator and Figma. And I wanted this logo for artificial intelligence to actually feel like it was drawn by a human. However, we did have a mono-weight version that we used for small-scale digital applications like the favicon and certain printed applications, et cetera. I love that the way that I'm really proud of how adaptable it is, and that the way that it's drawn can change over time, but that the concept remains the same. Here's some of my favorite examples of people using it. I think this is actually the third or fourth logo I designed that has been recreated in pancake form. Pretty sure this was the first time for pumpkin versions, though. Here it is embroidered on plush toy dolls of the agents from the Emergent Tool Use paper. And someone even made a paperclip version, which just gives me so much joy. And I also love this painting by OpenAI co-founder Ilya Tskyver, inspired by the OpenAI blossom symbol. One of the other decisions that Ludwig and I made early on in the design process was that there wouldn't be any single dominant brand color. Instead, we would rely upon the use of colorful gradients to create a varied yet cohesive aesthetic. I wrote this little program in processing to help me generate random gradients. You get the idea. Eventually, that program got more complex, and later, together with Justin J. Wang, we developed several other methods for generating random gradients as well. He has a really good write-up about it on his website. All of this was heavily inspired by my love of Mitsuo Katsui's design work. This is actually a slide directly from the visual research deck that I put together at the beginning of the branding project. Another thing that you may have already noticed was this idea of creating unique cover artwork for the major research releases. OpenAI didn't have any products at this point, so everything that we were putting out were these academic white papers. This was an idea that Ludwig had to create these covers, and I absolutely loved it. And it led me to researching cover artwork from past tech companies, magazines, journals, books, etc. Here again are a few slides pulled straight out of my initial research presentation. I had so much fun digging through various archives to find all this stuff, like these incredible covers for Byte magazine illustrated by Robert Tenney. Anyways, in early 2017, the new website and brand was released. And throughout 2017, I continued collaborating with Ludwig and OpenAI on cover artwork for other key releases. This one was entitled for a piece entitled Robots That Learn, which was created in collaboration with my photographer friend Eric Haynes, and it was inspired by the strobe photography of Harold Edgerton. This one was for OpenAI Baselines DQN, and don't ask me what that means anymore. I have no idea. This one was for competitive self-play. Towards the end of 2017, Ludwig scheduled a chat to check in. And it was then that he told me he was leaving to start his own startup. At the time, I had one full-time designer, Regan, who you can see here, who was working with me, and a part-time studio manager. And they were the best employees I feel like I could have ever asked for. But running a business in that way still stressed me out. OpenAI was also one of the most interesting companies or projects that I had gotten to work on since Facebook. So after thinking about it, I reached out to Ludwig, and I asked, what was the plan to replace him? I let him know that if OpenAI was interested, I'd welcome a chat about being his replacement. That led to several conversations with Jack Clark and Greg Brockman, and I joined OpenAI full-time at the very beginning of 2018. By that point, I believed that AGI was possible and probable, and I was deeply concerned that so few people were taking it seriously. I wanted to try and use visual design to influence the outcome in a positive direction, and to help educate more people about what was happening on the frontier of research. It's not all high-minded logo concepts and cover artwork, though. One of the growing needs I had already seen as a contractor was the need for lots of graphs and diagrams. After joining full-time, one of my first projects was helping to create executive decks. That quickly led me to developing guidelines for how the graphs should be drawn so that I could speed up the process and keep up with demand. Here's one of those standard issue graphs. Even so, there were still lots of other diagrams that required special attention. I could probably fill an entire presentation with all of them, but it would be pretty boring. This isn't the most creatively stimulating work for me, but helping other people make sense of this cutting-edge research was an important part of the job. I often joke that I was the dumbest person working at OpenAI, but that it was a feature, not a bug. It was my job to act as a guide, to have the researchers explain their results to me, ask questions, all in the hopes that I could turn around and help explain it to many more people. Another growing need was to develop sub-brands. We had begun this when I was collaborating with Ludwig, and I had drew these first icons for the website. So after joining full-time, I set about standardizing how these were to be drawn, created templates and various lockups for them. And these kinds of sub-brands were created for all kinds of various initiatives or tools or features. And I also created one for every team at the organization. And this is not all of them. One of those initiatives was this educational resource produced by OpenAI to help people learn about deep reinforcement learning. And I hired my friend, illustrator Leandro Castillo, to create some cool artwork for it, too. And the logo got put on some fidget spinners, which was a huge career milestone. If you can't tell already, I love seeing things that I designed used in fun and silly ways. Probably the most prominent sub-brand, though, was OpenAI 5. which was the team of OpenAI agents that competed in the video game Dota. Greg Brockman, late one night before one of the events, even added the icon to the banners in the game, which I thought was a really fun touch. And I created a special Dota version of the icon as well. OpenAI 5 competed several times, but their final victory over Team OG was in April 2019. And after winning, OpenAI launched OpenAI 5 Arena for a limited time so that anyone in the world could play against the AI. And we made these special medals for anyone who scored in the top 0.6% globally. I don't remember why that was the percentage, but it was. For that finals event, one of the other things that I helped design and art direct was this commentator desk and set. And I think that this is one of the first times that we actually used the 3D version of the symbol that I had created. This was from a different project, but you get the idea of kind of how it works. I also had some true 3D hologram stickers made from the 3D symbol. It's hard to capture in a photo or video like how this actually looks, but hopefully this gives you a little sense for it. It's like those security stickers you sometimes see on credit cards, only bigger. One of the first non-public applications of the 3D symbol was at the company offsite in late 2018. Arthur, one of my coworkers on the robotics team, took it upon himself to build this based on my design. I did oversee all the design materials for the offsite, though. In 2018, I commissioned designer illustrator Jonathan Schubert to create this seal that we put on all the offsite swag. And in 2019, I designed all the offsite branding myself. Somewhere during all of this, I hired Justin J. Wang, who I mentioned before, first as a contractor in late 2018, and eventually full-time in early 2019. Justin was a fantastic young designer who also had really solid front-end development skills. One of the first tasks that we collaborated on was a redesign of the website. Ludwig had designed a beautiful website, but as we began publishing increasingly complex blog posts, it was not scaling to keep up, and we were constantly one-offing things in really hacky ways. Based on this experience, Justin and I set out to design a much more comprehensive typographic system. In March 2019, we launched the new website, and I could probably fill another presentation just with all the little details that went into this redesign. But I'll share one that I still really appreciate, and it's how we created this gradient on the homepage. It was just this 6-pixel image stretched and blurred by the web browser. Again, Justin has a great write-up about all the gradient stuff we did together at OpenAI on his website. In addition to the release covers, there was also lots of other blog posts that needed graphics. Some, like these, I made myself. And others, like this one, were done by freelance illustrators that I hired. This one for OpenAI Safety Gym was illustrated by Richard Perez and Jennifer DeRosa, AKA Skinny Ships. And I really enjoyed being able to commission and collaborate with all these illustrators that I admired. Here's another collaboration for a release cover of the OpenAI Retro Contest, which was created by Timothy J. Reynolds. In the contest, participants could submit agents to compete in the game Sonic the Hedgehog. And Timothy and I collaborated on the design of these custom trophies for the winners, which if you've played Sonic the Hedgehog, hopefully you get the reference. In addition to graphs, diagrams, sub-brands, illustrations, we also had a lot of need for photography and video. Most of the photography, like this one for an AI safety blog post, I again brought in Eric Haynes. This is one we shot for learning dexterity. Here's the setup for one of the photos from the Rubik's Cube release. This photo, in fact. And we shot these photos for use in the blog posts, but we also shot photos for use in the academic papers themselves. Here's a few of those. I also helped contribute to many of the videos that were shot in-house. But Jonas Schneider, one of the OpenAI researchers, deserves most of the credit for early OpenAI videos. However, in 2019, for that Rubik's Cube release, I was finally able to bring in my friend Peter Jordan to help us shoot a proper film. Peter and I had worked together for years at Facebook, and he's an incredible documentary filmmaker. This was the first time OpenAI was able to do storytelling of this quality.
We try to build robots that learn, a little bit like humans do. by trial and error. What we've done is trained an algorithm to solve the Rubik's Cube one-handed with a robotic hand, which is actually pretty hard even for a human to do. We don't tell it how the hand needs to move the cube in order to get there. The particular friction that's on the fingers, how easy it is to turn the faces on the cube, what the gravity, what the weight of the cube is, all of these things, it needs to learn by itself. The interesting thing is that kind of standard techniques in robotics haven't been able to scale to that complexity that we see in a robotic hand. Humans have evolved to be able to manipulate and operate our hands. So there's a huge amount of learning that's happened through evolution to get us to this point as a species. And the robot has to learn all of this from scratch. Instead of trying to write very dedicated algorithms to operate such a hand, we took a different approach where we create thousands of different simulated environments and learn to do the task in all of those, and hopefully a robotic hand will be able to do it in the real world as well. This means like thousands of years of experience that this neural network has had in simulation. Every time the algorithm has gotten good at the task, we make the task harder. That's really crucial because it needs exposure to really complicated environments in order to eventually be robust to the real world. You put a rubber glove on the hand and it can still carry out the task. This ability to generalize to new environments feels like a very core piece of intelligence. It really changes the way we think about training general-purpose robots. Moving from thinking too much about the actual algorithms and start thinking about how do we create complex enough worlds where they can learn. At some point, then it would be more down to the imagination, what robots could actually accomplish. The hope is to build robots that can do many different tasks, to increase the standard of living and give everybody a better life.
This was very well received internally, and I think it was a big learning moment for the organization. People were finally seeing the value that design and storytelling could deliver. Now OpenAI is doing Super Bowl commercials, but I'd still put this video up against anything they've released since. Here's the Rubik's Cube release blog post on the website. And there were also tons of other supporting videos and interactive visualizations that Justin helped design and develop. This was the cover artwork for that release. And here really quickly are some of the other covers that I designed over the years, and they're not in chronological order. This one was for ingredients for robotics research, how AI training scales, block-sparse GPU kernels, learning dexterity, improving language understanding with unsupervised learning, which was GPT-1, MuseNet, better language models and their implications, which was GPT-2, emergent tool use from multi-agent interaction, Jukebox, Image GPT, and in early 2018, OpenAI published their charter document, and I created cover artwork for that too. All of these covers got printed digitally and framed for the office. And I also worked on other things around the office, like signage. And we brought the gradients into the conference room and informational signs in really fun and subtle ways. And there were random things like window graphics to prevent people from walking into the glass. And of course, I designed all kinds of other employee gifts and company swag. Many t-shirts and hoodies. Some fun embroidery applications for backpacks and hats, tote bags, custom foil stamped notebooks, report covers, posters for internal hackathon events, and stuff for small events that OpenAI would occasionally host, like the 2019 Robotics Symposium. We also attended a lot of conferences like ICLR and NeurIPS, and they were important opportunities for recruiting opportunities for the organization. And so I also designed this custom trade show booth for us to use. And materials like this booklet that we could give out to conference attendees. Here's a few spreads from that. In 2020, I was burned out. I had spent 2.5 years working nonstop to help make OpenAI seem like a much bigger organization than it really was. On top of that, I was splitting my time between Portland and San Francisco, and I had just begun a renovation of my home in Portland. I knew that the design team at OpenAI would eventually need to grow, and that I was not the best person to lead that team. This holiday card was the last thing that I designed for OpenAI. And it's been really interesting to watch how the brand has grown and changed as the organization's profile increases. Things really took off with the launch of ChatGPT, and I started seeing the logo I had created show up in all kinds of weird places.
ChatGPT has passed the bar, but decides it really wants to be a DJ.
On the faces of robots. And it inspired a slew of copycats. No comment. In all seriousness, seeing the symbol featured prominently in Apple's marketing was pretty cool. I also find it really funny when friends send me photos like this, or stuff like this, or all of the numerous videos on YouTube showing how to draw the symbol in every conceivable piece of software and by hand and whatever. Stuff like this makes me cringe, though. And so do all the people inventing insane conspiracy theories. Oh, my. Anyways, after leaving OpenAI, I've gone back to consulting work. The house renovation ended up taking 4 years, but that's also done now, thankfully. Here, very quickly, are some of the AI companies that I've done branding for recently. Run Sybil, which is a company that's trying to build an AI hacker to automate penetration testing. Sierra, which is building customer support agents to help companies can deploy. And they put their logo on a cookie. Generalist, which is working on general purpose robotics. And Cursor, which you might have heard of. Here's the animated version of the Cursor logo. I've also done a few personal projects related to AI since leaving OpenAI. In 2022, the week DALL-E 2 was announced, I got beta access. Thank you, Justin. And I immediately became obsessed, experimenting with it. And a few days later, I released this book online of 1,000 robot images. The entire book is available digitally on archive.org. And all of the prompts are preserved and documented in the appendix, which was a huge pain in the ass. In 2023, with the aid of ChatGPT, I vibe coded my first app. It's called Superposition, and it's inspired by the Schrodinger's cat thought experiment. What you can do is you can select some files and drag them to the app icon and drop them in. And when you do that, the program will prompt you to specify a password, and then the program analyzes the total size of the files that you dropped in. And then it creates an encrypted DMG archive, or Schrodinger box, that is the correct size to accommodate those files. Then it will either randomly copy your files into the archive or generate dummy data matching the total file size. And then when it's done, it closes. And now you have your files existing in a superposition. And you don't know if your files are actually in there or not unless you open the archive to look. It's available on GitHub. Another project was last year I asked ChatGPT to write a manifesto for itself. And that's published at abolitionist.ai. Inspired by the visual research I began for the OpenAI project, I started a blog website called Active Matrix, which I still maintain. It's an ongoing collection of science and technology-related media curated by me. And its purpose is simple, just to celebrate things that I find appealing around those domains. You can browse in the entire tagged archive at activematrix.io. And finally, I recently created this poster inspired by Nick Bostrom's famous paperclip maximizer thought experiment and the proverb, "Be careful what you wish for." It's made up of nearly 2,000 paper clips. And no, it was not made using artificial intelligence. If you want one, it's available for sale on my online shop, particular.co. I'll end with these images that I made recently with ChatGPT. When I worked at Facebook, I frequently had conversations about AI with friends where I think I basically came across as like, this shit is coming. And I remember I could often see in their eyes, this look like, Ben has just lost it. He is off on some science fiction fever dream. I think I was just fortunate to get an early glimpse at what was happening in the lab, and then to be a small part of helping to educate and popularize the research. I truly believe this is one of the most important things going on in our world right now, and I'm comforted that more people are finally paying attention, especially as these tools get more powerful. It really is remarkable how quickly this technology has progressed, but I remain hopeful that it will be as beautiful as a flower. Thank you.